one of the biggest things that we have with toddlers are like the notorious temper tantrums. And I personally had like my child was such a, clearly was a highly sensitive person from birth. I can, I'm a highly sensitive person, so I can see that. And she was just so picky. But I mean, we would have sometimes like three epic like tantrums in a day, and I was just exhausted. So tell us about what's going on there in the tantrums.
Yes. Well, tantrums come with the territory. And what's happening is it's the way that toddlers are really expressing themselves. Is how they process emotions, release emotions, and try to understand and change what's going on around them. And toddlers really have limited life experience. So they don't have a lot of experience on how to handle all the emotional ups and downs. And they also lack the brain maturation. So they don't have the skills to process and navigate big emotions on their own. And of course, the big emotions not lead to the dysregulation of the behavior. So if the emotions are going like this, then behavior goes like this. And all this is just mixed up in their developmental drive of being independent. And so we see these tantrums and meltdowns, but I really encourage parents to think of it as an emotional meltdown versus something that's bad or wrong. It's like really an emotional release. And it's a really typical, normal, healthy part of development for toddlers to have this emotional release because it actually gives them practice in coming back to their equilibrium and starting to have the building blocks of being able to regulate their emotions and then their behavior.
It's a great way of looking at it as an emotional release. I remember one time, a long time ago, I saw an image of a some celebrity dad, and he had been like caught on camera or something at some like theme park with his 3 or 4 year old daughter, and she was just like losing it and having a tantrum. She was on the ground kicking and screaming, and all he did is like he's just like stood, and the family stood around a little circle at her and kept her safe. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is such a great example of she them understanding and realizing she's having an emotional release, and there's not much they can do about it at that point, which is what I talk about. So tell, because I know that this question is in the listener's mind, like, yes, but what do I do? What do I do when my child has a tantrum? What do we do when a toddler has a tantrum in the home? And Devin, what do people do when the toddler has a tantrum, like in the cereal aisle?
Well, it's not there. The two scenarios aren't that different in general, but it feels different because of all the external pressure that we feel, or the pressure that we put on ourselves that we interpret that's external, but we really put on ourselves whenever it's in public. It's a great question. I want to mention that tantrums really peak between 18 and 36 months. So that's when you're going to see the most tantrums, and then it's going to slowly start to diminish. And the example that you gave was so beautiful because after, kind of changing your lens from, okay, tantrums are a problem to tantrums are a healthy emotional release, the next thing that I say, well, let the tantrum happen and then create safety. Creating safety is so vital, whether you're at home or you're in the cereal aisle, because first of all, we want, of course, a child to be safe. And sometimes tantrums can be physical. We don't want them, to hit their head or, get hurt on a piece of furniture, something like that. So we want to move them the most minimal amount to create safety, to make sure they're safe. But the safety piece is super important for us as the adult, because whenever we can tell ourselves, okay, my child's safe, I'm safe, this is not an emergency, we can start to separate our emotions all of our emotions that are coming up when we're confronted with our child's feelings and emotions that, make us a little bit uncomfortable, we can start to separate our emotions from our actions. And this is how we start to diffuse our reactions, and by creating that space between our emotions and our actions. So, really letting ourselves know, wait a minute, okay, they're safe, I'm safe. We can take a moment. I can get grounded, and everything's going to be okay. Because in the end, the tantrum, it's an emotional release. So toddlers need us to stay calm and hold space for their emotions. And in terms of what to do in that moment, well, it's really about getting to know your toddler and following their lead. Some toddlers need you to stay closer. They need some more words of reassurance and validation. Other toddlers, depending on what part of they're at in their upsetness, if they've reached the peak or not of the upsetness, they need us to move back a little bit. They need us to speak less words of validation and reassurance. And, so it just depends on the moment. But if you're in a store and the pressure just feels too big and it's too much and you're having trouble getting grounded, even though your toddler is safe, it's okay to pick them up, abandon your cart, or push it to the front and say, hey, I'll be back, and go to the car, go to a bench, get some fresh air, change the scenery. And oftentimes it'll help in calming you both.
There's so many words of wisdom there, Devin, that I really appreciate, and kind of from what I'm, that idea with the thoughts of I'm safe. Those thoughts are so helpful, especially for the nervous system, because the nervous system is like your own nervous system as a parent is, go stressed out and in fight, flight, or freeze stress response, and so is the nervous system of the child, right? Like both nervous systems, are freaking out. And so this, to remind ourselves I'm safe, my child is safe, are probably like the most important words that we could say. Like, I'm safe, my child is safe, it's okay. And the idea that you said to pause, like, there's not a lot to do, so we just want to be, we want to be there and be a presence if we're able to.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, like in the middle of a tantrum or a meltdown, your child is just getting tossed around in the sea of emotions, and it's triggering. And sometimes we can just jump right in the ocean with them instead of like throwing out the lifesaver, right? And it's a completely normal human reaction because, we get triggered sometimes. And it's important. That's why the safety part's so important, because when you can establish safety, you can remind yourself it's not an emergency. So if it's not an emergency and there's nothing to fix, then it actually gives us the space to take a break. So, if you need to step back, if you need to sit down, if you need to go to the window, for me, like going to the window and looking outside, sometimes just throwing it open and getting some fresh air, something that I look for things like that really help me like interrupt the stress response. And sometimes throwing up in the window, whether it's hot air outside or cool air, is enough to do that for me. But it's so important. And, honestly, when it comes to these tantrums and meltdowns, because there isn't so much to do for a child, most of the work is just internal. And I always invite parents and caregivers to look at it as an opportunity to practice, because, hey, it might not look perfect every time, but we're just looking for, moving the needle 1% more towards regulation, maybe regulating ourselves like 1 minute faster than we did last time, or something like that, because it's a practice and it takes time. It's not going to look perfect, and it's okay to give yourself permission to take care of your needs even when your child's having a tantrum.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Janla Van Zant, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.